Here at CBR, there are a few things we love more than a good old character crossover. And since Sony and Disney are finally playing nice with their movie rights to Spider-Man, there's an increased chance we can see Tom Holland's Spider-Man interacting with the alien symbiote Venom. Comic book fans know Peter Parker is responsible for some of Venom's abilities, but which of them is actually stronger? If these two went head-to-head, who would come out on top? Well, obviously we would, since we get to watch it all play out from the comfort of our local movie theater. But could Spider-Man actually take down Venom on his own? Let's find out. Venom has a lot of incredible superpowers, but he's not exactly the master of subtlety. Hey, that's just part of his charm. While Spider-Man has his own set of impressive powers, let's not forget that his primary ability is also the most difficult to portray on the big screen. And it's a big reason why Spider-Man would be at a serious disadvantage in a one-on-one fight against Venom. Yes, we're talking about the infamous SpiderSense. It's not a flashy power, but it finds its way into pretty much every facet of Spider-Man's battle strategy. It's a precognitive sense that warns him of incoming threats, like during the clash of the Avengers when Bucky Barnes hurled a bench at him. That could have done some serious damage if it connected with his head, but even though he was facing away from Bucky, he was still able to dodge because he could sense it coming. Or when he's just riding the school bus and he suddenly senses the Q-ship of Ebony Maw arriving in New York City in Infinity War. Even if you can't see his arm hair raise, you assume it's happening whenever danger is coming his way. Which is almost always, but just go ahead and guess which one of Spider-Man's abilities doesn't work on Venom. That's right. His SpiderSense might be the most important, albeit least flashy weapon in his arsenal, but it's also completely useless against Venom. You see, Venom and Peter Parker have a complicated history together. Before the alien symbiote bonded with Eddie Brock, it was pals with Peter Parker. Okay, maybe pals is a bit of a stretch, especially from Peter's perspective. Just look at what a nightmare their union was for Spider-Man and the despicable things he did under Venom's control. Terrible. Anyway, although Peter eventually broke free and broke Venom's heart, the two were bonded to one another. Venom was not only able to acquire some of Peter's abilities, but he also got an up-close and personal view of his SpiderSense in action. So much so that it's ineffective on him. Sneaking up on Spider-Man isn't easy, but it's something Venom is more than capable of. Sure, Peter Parker is pretty durable even on his own, and he has some help from his super suits, but his SpiderSense is his main form of defense, and he can't use it at all when he's up against Venom. It's a devastating blow, and it doesn't just affect his defensive capabilities. Spider-Man is strong, but he's also incredibly agile, and that's a huge part of his fighting abilities. We've seen him lose his SpiderSense before, like when Peter Parker makes an electronic device to disable the precognitive abilities of the Slayers, and it ends up affecting him too. He ended up having to relearn how to fight with the help of Shang-Chi, who helped him learn the way of the spider, or Spider-Fu as Peter likes to call it. And really, that's much more fun to say. Relying on Spider-Fu means no long-range attacks, zoning in on clusters of nerves, and taking advantage of pressure points. Or, you know, things that really aren't that helpful when you're fighting an alien symbiote like Venom. The fact that the symbiote was once bonded to Peter means it has all the knowledge it needs to destroy him. Kinda reminds me of my relationship with my ex. Anyway, even we've seen Spider-Man at his best against Venom, and he's not really Spider-Man. Okay, that might not make sense, but it does in the comic books. Ben Reilly is a clone of Peter Parker who usually goes by Scarlet Spider and never bonded with Venom. The DNA used to create Ben predated Peter bonding with Venom, which meant Venom triggered Ben's SpiderSense, giving him a huge advantage in their confrontation. But for regular Earth 616 Peter Parker, his SpiderSense would be out of commission in this fight. Watch out, Pete. Of course, Peter has plenty of other powers, but let's not forget that so does Venom. Like the fact that Venom can just make more symbiotes if he wants to, and he has. And it seems like his immunity to the SpiderSense is hereditary, since it doesn't work on Carnage either. Fighting against a single alien symbiote is one thing, but how about a whole team of them? It might seem unfair for Venom to outnumber his opponent by making his own teammates, but since when does he worry about playing fair? And that's just another strike against Peter Parker in this fight. He's definitely not perfect, but it's safe to say Peter is a good guy. Well, usually. Peter's a hero, which means he has to think about the safety of others when he's in a fight. Just think about that scene in Age of Ultron when Tony Stark takes on the Hulk. Even though Tony's wearing armor designed for just this purpose, he's still at a disadvantage because he has to worry about all the innocent bystanders who could get easily crushed. Meanwhile, the Hulk, well, that's not really on his radar. Tony still manages to triumph because of the aforementioned special Hulkbuster armor, but he's definitely slowed down because of his dedication to others, while the Hulk can just go all out. If Venom and Peter were having their fight anywhere near other people, that would be a huge distraction for Peter. It sounds weird to say, but the fact that he values human life would be a liability in this fight. Venom, well, he doesn't have that problem. And neither do any of his other symbiotes that he could bring to the battle. Oh, and did we mention these other symbiotes like Agony, Phage, and Riot all have their own special abilities? And if the fight takes place somewhere with no innocent bystanders, Venom would likely still have a sizable advantage. Spider-Man has been to space before, but he needs to have the proper equipment, and if there's a malfunction, he could be in serious danger. Meanwhile, outer space is Venom's home turf. Not only can he breathe in space, but he can also breathe underwater, which Peter obviously can't. In Carnage Unleashed, Venom even travels through the internet. Can Peter Parker email himself? We didn't think so. Advantage, Venom. Venom can also camouflage himself to better sneak up on Spider-Man since he can't be detected via SpiderSense. And while the MCU version of Spider-Man relies on web shooters, Venom makes his own webbing, which means there's less potential for something to go wrong. Of course, if it loses too much, it weakens itself, but it can't afford to be a little more careless than Peter Parker. Not only can Venom toss webbing around, but it can also use its entire body as a weapon. It can even control the bits of itself it shoots off, while Spider-Man's webbing just sticks to things. Venom's whole being is pretty much an arsenal, while Spider-Man is limited to the devices he can carry on his person and his own talents. Oh, and all Venom's weapons are also sentient. Now, we're not saying Venom could absolutely annihilate Spider-Man, and there's no way he could even begin to fight back. Venom has weaknesses that can be easily exploited, like fire and sound. Peter Parker is an expert at putting together handy gadgets, so with some prep and time and knowledge of the symbiote, he can do some damage for sure. But he's also very clever and resourceful, and that counts for a lot in this fight. For example, if he could trick Venom into expending most of his material, he could weaken it enough to defeat it. Then there's the fact that we've been assuming this is the symbiote attached to Eddie Brock, since he's the one who bonded with it in the Venom movie. But Venom's strength relates to how strongly his host hates Peter Parker, which is what makes him and Eddie Brock such a powerful pair. If Venom is bound to a less intense host, then it would be much easier for Spider-Man to stand against him. It's not impossible for him to beat Venom alone, but by comic book and comic book movie standards, nothing is really impossible. As much as we don't like to say our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man may be outmatched here, well, he may be outmatched here. Being part of a superhero team is more than just having moral support, especially since emotional intelligence and open communication are things even the best heroes struggle with sometimes. Being on a team means everyone brings their own strengths and weaknesses to the fight. Black Widow might not be able to do much if you're trying to bring down a building, but if you're sending someone on a spy mission, it probably shouldn't be the Incredible Hulk. With Venom's adaptability, having allies to call on in a fight is pretty much a requirement. But what are the odds that Venom and Spider-Man will be coming to face on the big screen anytime soon? Actually, considering recent events, the odds seem pretty darn good. We all know about the Sony-Disney struggle over the movie rights to Spider-Man. After much negotiating and a ton of tears from us, and just not from the movie studio execs, they managed to work it out so Spider-Man gets at least one more standalone movie in the MCU, and he will appear in one additional MCU film. Ever since Peter Parker first swung into the MCU, there's been talking about bridging the gap between the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Sony's universe of Marvel characters. And some comments made by Marvel studio head Kevin Feige only make that crossover seem even more imminent. He said, "Spider-Man also happens to be the only hero with the superpower to cross cinematic universes. So as Sony continues to develop their own Spideyverse, you never know what surprises the future might hold. We don't need superpowers to leap to conclusions, and that's just what we're gonna do here." It certainly sounds like Marvel and Sony are planning some kind of crossover event. Sony's Venom and Into the Spider-Verse both did well, and are getting sequels, so we wouldn't be too surprised to see Spider-Man and Venom sharing the screen time at some point. The only question is, will Spider-Man be by himself or will he have a team with him? Following Endgame, the Avengers roster is kinda empty, and Far From Home definitely put the pressure on Peter to replenish the ranks. And although Sony has the rights to Spider-Man and associated characters, they don't have nearly the same character library to pull from compared to Disney. If Sony wants to pit Spidey against Venom, it makes sense that Spider-Man would need some backup, especially in light of Carnage being teased at the end of the first Venom movie. If Tom Holland's Spider-Man ends up back with Sony, it's possible he won't be alone, at least not if he wants to survive. This could also be a way to touch on one of those Marvel comic book storylines fans have been clamoring for. When the Skrulls showed up in Captain Marvel, fans were sure a secret invasion storyline was imminent. This was a comic book crossover event which featured an invasion by the wicked shape-shifting Skrulls, and left our heroes wondering who they could trust. But as we now know, the Skrulls in Captain Marvel were directly not wicked, and in fact they had a pretty sympathetic backstory. So it seems like the secret invasion storyline wasn't going to be a thing. But let's not forget that one of Venom's abilities is shape-shifting. It can allow its host to blend in by mimicking any kind of clothing or the appearance of other people. Sure, it's not Skrull-level steel, but it definitely has some potential to build some serious mistrust among our heroes. We're not saying it would be an exact retelling of Secret Invasion, but it could capture enough of the storyline spirit to be entertaining. Spider-Man and Venom are a great combination, and they can only get more interesting when there are more characters involved. Spider-Man and Venom are a great combination, and they only get more interesting when there are more characters involved. We think Venom would definitely have the upper hand here, but who do you think would win in a fight between Venom and Spider-Man? Tell us who you'd bet on in the comment section, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.